Good afternoon, everyone. In today's lecture, we will continue our discussion of regional development theories. Today, we move toward the neoclassical perspective. Neoclassical theories generally place greater emphasis on markets, trade, efficiency, specialization, productivity, and equilibrium mechanisms. They attempt to explain why some regions become economically successful while others lag behind, not primarily through government spending, but through competitiveness, specialization, technological progress, and market interactions. We will begin with one of the most important concepts in economics, the theory of comparative advantage. To understand this theory, we need to briefly return to the historical development of economic thought. During the 16th and 17th centuries, many European states followed the doctrine of mercantilism. Mercantilists believed that national wealth depended on accumulating gold and maintaining a positive trade balance through exports. International trade was viewed almost as a competition where one country gains only if another loses. This perspective was later criticized by classical economists such as Adam Smith and David Ricardo. Ricardo introduced the theory of comparative advantage at the beginning of the 19th century and fundamentally transformed economic thinking about trade. Ricardo argued that even if one country is more productive in all industries, international trade can still benefit all participants. The key is specialization. Each country or region should specialize in producing goods for which it has the lowest relative production cost compared to other regions. This is extremely important because comparative advantage is not about absolute superiority, but relative efficiency. Let us imagine two countries. One is highly industrialized and technologically advanced, while the other has cheaper labor and favorable climatic conditions for agriculture. According to Ricardo, the industrialized country should focus on advanced industrial production, while the second country should specialize in agriculture. Both countries then trade with each other, and both benefit because they produce goods more efficiently than if they attempted complete self-sufficiency. This theory became foundational for free trade economics and later for many regional development approaches. In regional development, comparative advantage explains why regions specialize in different economic activities. Some regions focus on tourism due to natural beauty, others on manufacturing because of industrial traditions, and others on technology due to universities and innovation ecosystems. However, comparative advantage also has more complex dimensions. Economists distinguish between high road and low road forms of development. High road development means that a region competes through innovation, technology, quality, education, and productivity. Low road development relies mainly on cheap labor, low taxes, and low environmental standards. This distinction is highly relevant today because many developing regions initially attract investment through low costs. But long-term success usually requires transition toward high-value production and innovation. As an example, the Czech Republic and Slovakia developed comparative advantage in automotive production due to industrial traditions, skilled labor, and geographical location within Europe. Over time, however, the country increasingly attempts to move from low-cost assembly toward research, engineering, and innovation-based activities. Building upon comparative advantage, economists developed simplified regional models to explain how regional equilibrium might emerge through market mechanisms. The simplest of these approaches is the single sector model. This model assumes that all regions produce essentially the same product or belong to one dominant economic sector. Labor and capital move between regions according to differences in wages and productivity. The logic is relatively straightforward. If one region offers higher wages because of greater productivity, workers from less productive regions will migrate there. As labor supply increases in the successful region, wages gradually decrease, while wages rise in the region losing workers due to labor shortages. Eventually, equilibrium should theoretically emerge. Similarly, capital flows toward regions where returns are highest. Investors seek profitable opportunities, and over time these movements should reduce regional disparities. The model therefore assumes perfect labor mobility, perfect information, flexible wages, rational behavior, absence of major barriers to migration. Of course, in reality, these assumptions are highly unrealistic. People do not move solely because of wages. Social ties, culture, language, housing costs, and emotional attachment to play strongly influence migration decisions. Similarly, capital mobility may be limited by infrastructure quality, political stability, or institutional conditions. Nevertheless, the model introduced an important neoclassical principle. Regional inequalities may gradually decrease through market adjustments without strong state intervention. The single sector model demonstrates how labor and capital mobility may theoretically reduce regional inequalities. However, its assumptions are overly simplified and do not fully reflect the complexity of real regional economies. Economists soon realized that real economies are far more complex than single sector systems. This led to the development of the dual sector model. Unlike the previous model, the dual sector model assumes the existence of multiple industries and trade between regions. This is a major improvement because different industries have different productivity levels, technological intensity, and export potential. The model assumes that labor and capital move toward more productive sectors and regions. Export-oriented industries become especially important because they generate external demand and higher incomes. The diagram associated with the dual sector model illustrates this dynamic process. When export demand increases, product prices rise. This increases profits and productivity in the export sector. Higher profitability attracts additional capital investment and increases demand for labor. Wages rise, attracting workers from less productive sectors or regions. This movement gradually changes regional economic structures. Unlike the single sector model, labor and capital can flow simultaneously in the same direction toward productive export sectors. The model also highlights the role of technological progress. Regions specializing in technologically advanced export industries may achieve faster productivity growth and stronger competitiveness. However, equilibrium in this model is much harder to achieve because structural adjustments take time. Entire industries may decline while others emerge, requiring retraining, infrastructure development, and institutional adaptation. Thus, the dual sector model better reflects real economic complexity by considering multiple industries, trade, and structural transformation. It explains how productivity differences between sectors influence regional development and labor mobility. After World War II, economics increasingly adopted quantitative methods, mathematical modeling, and statistical analysis. This period is often referred to as the quantitative revolution. One important result was the development of growth accounting. Economists observed that economic growth during the 1950s and 1960s could not be explained solely by increases in labor and capital. Something else was driving productivity growth. Robert Solow introduced technological progress into economic models as a key explanatory factor. According to Solow, technology significantly increases labor productivity. Workers equipped with better machines, knowledge, and organizational systems produce more output. Over time, economists expanded the meaning of technology beyond machines alone. It began to include education, human capital, organizational knowledge, innovation, management quality, research and development. Growth accounting therefore shifted attention toward intangible development factors. This was extremely important for regional development because it highlighted why some regions achieve long-term competitiveness despite limited natural resources. We now move toward a more historically oriented concept, known as path dependence. This theory argues that historical events and past decisions strongly influence future regional development. In other words, regions do not start from equal positions. Historical accidents, institutional traditions, industrial specialization, and political decisions create long-term development trajectories. While David emphasized that even small historical events can generate cumulative long-term effects. For example, once a region develops strong industrial traditions, infrastructure, educational institutions, and supplier networks around a particular industry, This specialization tends to reinforce itself over time. Path dependence therefore explains why regions often remain specialized in particular activities for decades or even centuries. However, this can also create technological lock-in effects. Regions may become trapped in outdated industries because institutions, skills, and infrastructure are too specialized to adapt easily. So, path dependence highlights the importance of historical development in shaping regional economies. Past decisions and institutional structures often strongly influence present development opportunities and constraints.
One of the most influential modern neoclassical approaches is new economic geography, associated particularly with Paul Krugman. Unlike traditional classical theories, new economic geography acknowledges imperfect competition, increasing returns, transportation costs, and historical processes. The central concept here is agglomeration. Agglomeration means spatial concentration of economic activities. Companies, workers, services, and innovation tend to cluster geographically because proximity creates advantages. Krugman argued that increasing returns are one of the key drivers of regional specialization and inequality. Once economic activity becomes concentrated in a region, cumulative advantages emerge: larger labor markets, supplier networks, knowledge spillovers, specialized services, stronger innovation capacity. These agglomeration advantages attract additional firms and workers, reinforcing concentration.
Transportation costs also matter. Firms prefer locations where they can efficiently access suppliers and customers. New economic geography therefore explains why large metropolitan regions often dominate economically. New economic geography explains regional concentration through agglomeration economies, increasing returns, and imperfect competition. Economic success tends to reinforce itself spatially through cumulative advantages. A striking modern example of such an agglomeration is Silicon Valley in San Francisco. The company mapping is shown in the background of this slide. Closely connected with new economic geography is new growth theory. This theory focuses on endogenous growth factors, factors generated internally within the economy itself. Unlike older theories where technological progress appeared as an external phenomenon, new growth theory argues that innovation, learning, and knowledge accumulation result from deliberate human activities. Regions investing in education, research, entrepreneurship, and innovation may therefore generate self-sustaining growth. An important concept here is convergence. Some economists argue that poorer regions gradually catch up with richer ones because investments generate higher returns where capital is scarce. However, convergence is not automatic. Regions with similar conditions tend to form convergence clubs. For example, regions with strong institutions, education systems, and infrastructure often converge together economically, while weaker regions struggle to catch up. So, new growth theory emphasizes endogenous factors such as knowledge, innovation, and human capital as key drivers of long-term regional growth and convergence. To conclude today's lecture, neoclassical theories expanded regional economics far beyond simple location questions. These theories emphasize specialization, trade, technological progress, labor productivity, market mechanisms, agglomeration economies, innovation, historical development. Unlike Keynesian approaches focused on state intervention, neoclassical theories generally assume that markets and competition play central roles in regional development. At the same time, modern neoclassical approaches increasingly recognize that history matters, institutions matter, innovation matters, agglomeration matters, and multiple development equilibria may exist. Today, many regional development policies combine both Keynesian and neoclassical approaches. Governments support innovation clusters, infrastructure, education, and competitiveness while also addressing inequalities and market failures. Ultimately, neoclassical theories help us understand why some regions become highly competitive and innovative while others struggle to adapt in an increasingly globalized economy. Thank you for your attention.